Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
ලෝකේ රසායනය සමග ඔබේ අත්යට දහදිය දුගඳ පාලනය කරයි. දවස පුරා fresh බව රඳවයි.
On First at 9, this Friday, the 18th of November 2022. Competitive industries. Government plans to remove para-tariffs and the tariffs over 5 years with the trade adjustment program to help industries, says President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
The long-term goal is by next year or year after enter into an agreement with the regional comprehensive economic partnership that brings you into Southeast Asia and East Asia.
Counter bargains. Sri Lanka looks at swapping debt for nature as part of a finance agreement. Room for clarification. Sri Lanka postpones round of debt restructuring talks over creditor concerns, says State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinghe. Entertainment hub. Colombo Lotus Tower tracks first foreign investment of over $1 billion.
This will definitely be the entertainment hub of Sri Lanka.
We will also want to create a hub to develop trade, investment and tourism activities between Singapore and Sri Lanka.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, the Colombo Lotus Tower attracted its first foreign investment amounting to $1 billion from Singapore for the development of entertainment and other infrastructure at the premises. Now, this investment agreement will see the development of water sports and other entertainment zones at the Lotus Tower within the next 6 months. Addressing the event, Chief Administrative Officer of the Colombo Lotus Tower Private Limited, Major General Prasad Samarasinghe, says the Lotus Tower will be the entertainment hub in Sri Lanka following its developments via these investments.
Singapore-based renovation and interior design company Create Design Private Limited signed a $1 billion investment agreement with Colombo Lotus Tower Private Limited today, making it the first foreign investment to be attracted following 2 months of commencement of operations.
We are very happy and proud to say that we have got one of the best investment to our country. I think this is one of the best investment we are getting for so many years now. Within 2 months, we have done a lot and we have changed the real atmosphere and the thinking of the Lotus Tower. This will definitely be the entertainment hub of Sri Lanka. We need more investments from Singapore as well as from other countries to the Lotus Tower as well as to the country.
We will join hand in hand to make this project a very successful one, a turning point for Sri Lanka from today onwards. We will be bringing investment up to more than $1 billion within the next 3 years at this Colombo Lotus Tower premises. And also we will be developing the water sports and of course at the Colombo Lotus Tower within the next 6 months. And then at the same time, we will also want to create a hub to develop trade, investment and tourism activities between Singapore and Sri Lanka. And we also have plans to invest at BR Vijaywarana Mawata surrounding Colombo Lotus Tower, and we want to develop the economy.
It's not only this investment, the future, there's so many. I think we have discussed with Cynthia and their company, is it Create, for future investments in other areas as well within tourism. We have so many investments and so many events taking place. And right now, I think there's about 200 million, which is going to be invested within the next 6 months in Sri Lanka.
Now, Sri Lanka is in talks for a debt for nature swap deal in climate-focused finance, which was a kind of agreement discussed at the United Nations COP27 summit in Egypt. According to Reuters, other countries that are exploring the possibility of striking such a deal of nature swap deals to ease the debt problems are Ecuador and Cape Verde. People familiar with the debt for nature swap deal talks have told Reuters that Sri Lanka is discussing a deal of up to $1 billion. The news agency further stated that Ecuadorian, Sri Lankan and Cape Verde governments did not respond to requests when inquired with this regard. A debt for nature swap deal is a bilateral agreement which involves purchasing foreign debt, converting that debt into local currency and using the proceeds to fund conservation activities. The key to the transaction lies in the willingness of commercial banks or governments to sell debt at less than the value of the original loan. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that the government is looking at removing para-tariffs with a trade adjustment program to help industries and other manufacturers meet competition, adding that discussions from government side have already been initiated with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. Speaking at an event in Colombo today, the head of state offered an explanation on the decision to sell Sri Lanka Telecom and Sri Lanka Insurance despite making profits, saying that these companies were only making profits because the government has been pumping finances into the two state-owned institutions.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe took part in a post-budget forum organised by the Colombo University MBA Alumni Association on the theme Hurdling Towards Opportunities Beyond Challenges.
We are looking at removing the para-tariffs and the tariffs over 5 years with a trade adjustment program to help our industries and manufacturers to meet that competition. But beyond that, the Singapore FTA will be in operation by early 2023. Then the FTAs with India, with Thailand, with China. But the long-term goal is by next year or year after enter into an agreement with the regional comprehensive economic partnership that brings you into Southeast Asia and East Asia. And that's not the end. Finally, we should look within 10 to 12 years' time to be able to join the high standards that are set out in the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. That really raises the level of our economy. If that's the only way that we can go, the billions and trillions of rupees we have wasted would have been better spent on our education, health or housing. So we have to spend on education, we have to spend on health, we have to spend on housing, we have to spend on social welfare, which have been neglected. We need money for those. As far as businesses are concerned, we should basically be able to give that to the private sector, both local and foreign. So that is the thinking behind it. They still ask, why are you selling profit-making enterprises? Look at the SLT, it's making profits. If you ask the secretary to the treasury, he will tell you what profits that are made and how much money we'll have to pump in the future, the money we haven't got. I want to tell you in Sinhalese, a discussion that took place. They asked me, I may ආයතන ඔක්කොම විකුණන්නේ මේ සියල්ලම ලාභ ලබන ආයතනනේ මේකෙන් රටට විශාල හානියක් වෙනව නේද කියලා. So I said දැන් මේවා කළා හරි ගියේ නෑනේ. ඇයි මේක විකුණන්නේ? ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සේවයත්, ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් ආයතනයත්, ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් ආයතනයත්, හිල්ටන් හෝටලයත්, වෝටර්සෙජ් හෝටලයත් විකිණුවාම අපි ඩොලර් වලට විකුණන්නේ. ඩොලර් වලට විකුණාම අද බිඳුවට තියෙන අපේ විදේශ විනිමය සංචතිය ඒ වගේම ඩොලර් බිලියන 3කින් වත් වැඩි වෙනවා. ඩොලර් බිලියන 3කින් වැඩි වුණාම මං කිව්වා ගෙදර කුස්සියට තියෙන මුදල් ශක්තිමත් වෙනවා. අපේ සේවකයන්ගේ විශ්‍රාම වැටුප් අර්ථසාධක අරමුදල දැන් 50%කින් අඩපණ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. බාල්දු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒක ආපහු දියුණු වෙනවා. අපි මොකද්ද කරන්න ඕනේ? ජනතාව ශක්තිමත් කරනවද? නැත්නම් ජනතාවේ මුදල් අරගෙන ආපහු අපි ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් සමාගමයි ටෙලිකොම් එකට දානවද? එයා ලංකා එකට දානවද? ඉතින් මට තියෙන එක මේක මිනිස්සු දිහා බලන්න. ගොඩනැගිලිවත් සමාගම් දිහා නෙමෙයි. ජනතාවට දෙනවනම් මේක වෙන හරියක් කියලා.
Following this, the head of state responded to questions raised on why taxes were doubled for the export industries.
Budget did have a greater focus on export-led economic growth. The private sector is complaining about higher taxing, doubling of taxes. Exporters, what would be your response?
Very simple. We need the revenue. But we have to remember, in most parts of the world, in Europe, export industry pays the same tax as the local industries. There is no differential. Then the question comes whether by giving tax exemptions, we are actually subsidizing export industry, which is otherwise not competitive. So I think we have to look at both those. We want a competitive economy, a competitive export industry. Then we give them concessions to start with, but thereafter we certainly will have to get the revenue from the export industry. Otherwise you become export-oriented economy and you will have less revenue than you have today. The government has a duty also to maintain a stable exchange rate. That's what we have to do. So let both the combine go ahead. This is a time of transformation for all enterprises, local law export oriented. But we have to ensure with this local law export oriented that they are certainly competitive and they need not be in any way subsidized by the state.
The parliamentarian of the Samagi Janabalawege, Rauf Hakim, says he agrees with the decision to restructure Sri Lankan Airlines, Sri Lanka Telecom, Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, Hilton and the Water's Edge. He said this while participating in the debate on the second reading of the appropriation bill. Meanwhile, former President Maithripala Sirisena expressed his disappointment over the budget proposal to place the Mahaweli lands under divisional secretariats.
මම කනගාටු වෙනවා මහවැලි ඉඩම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ කතාවේ තිබෙන යෝජනාව පිළිබඳව මහවැලි අධිකාරියෙන් මහවැලි ඉඩම් බැහැර කරලා ප්‍රාදේශීය ලේකම් පාලනයට දීම අද ඊයේ යෝජනාවක් නෙවෙයි මීට කලිනුත් දීර්ඝ කාලීනව ආපු යෝජනාවක් මම ජනාධිපති කාලෙත් මේක නවත්තගත්තා ඊට කලිනුත් ආවා මේ ඉඩම් බැහැර කළොත් ප්‍රාදේශීය ලේකම් පාලනයට සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම මහවැලි අධිකාරිය වැහිලා යනවා ඒක නිසා මහවැලි ඉඩම් බේරා ගැනීම ඉතාමත් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. This budget talks about another almost 3,500 billion rupees in revenue. Is it realistic? Could we reach this target? Of course, the tax revenue will increase with the VAT based on inflationary position, that is, the inflationary prices will result in a certain amount of tax being collected. But then we have to try and see whether these reforms that have been suggested. Now, of course, the President talks about the state-owned enterprises reform. Now, we have to try and see the cost-reflective pricing has already started with the petroleum products and thereafter now electricity, water. We have now begun to try and implement what has been agreed at the staff level with the IMF team. But in the meantime, how about disposal of assets? Now there is so much of low-hanging fruit that we can get rid of. I am opposed to what others in the opposition trying to talk about not to privatize the insurance corporation, not to privatize some other Water's Edge and various other. These are low-hanging fruit we can get rid of easily. But then the question is there must be some transparency in how the final deal is struck and this House must be kept informed. His Excellency the President had a smooth run in presenting the budget. There was hardly any heckling. There is some kind of understanding on both sides of the aisle about the dire circumstances in which we are, and then we have accepted the broad framework, but then some of the policy issues we have some disagreements, but still coming to approve this budget, I think we will look at it while we discuss it as an opposition together and decide what we should do.
වර්තමානයේ මා ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ මේ දීලා තියෙන අවස්ථාව මේ රටේ සමස්තයක් දේශපාලඥයා මේ රටේ නිලධාරීන් මේ රටේ පුරවැසියන් මේ සියලු දෙනාම එකට ඉඳන් කතා කරන්නට පුළුවන් එකට ඉඳන් යන්න පුළුවන් ගමනක් දැක්කටි කාලයකට වුවත් අපි එකට එක්කාසු වෙලා යා යුතුයි කියන අදහස මේ අවස්ථාවේ යෝජනා කරමින්
Sri Lanka's Ministry of Finance and the World Bank held discussions pertaining to the island's future development plans and policies, while also focusing on fiscal oversight and debt management and improving tax administration. Following the meeting, the World Bank Director for Sri Lanka, Faris Hadad-Zervos, met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe. A discussion with the World Bank representatives on Sri Lanka's future development plans and policies was held with the World Bank Director for Sri Lanka, Faris Hadad-Zervos, at the Ministry of Finance yesterday. The meeting was chaired by Senior Advisor to the President on National Security and Chief of Staff to the President, Sagal Ratnayaka, State Minister of Finance Shehan Semsinghe and Minister Dilum Amunagama. The future development plans and policies of Sri Lanka were discussed at length during the meeting. The discussions focused on a wide range of areas including improving fiscal oversight and debt management, improving tax administration, reducing sovereign financial sector nexus and systemic risks. They also held discussions on improving energy sector performance and reducing the carbon footprint, restructuring and divesting of SOEs, reducing policy uncertainty and increasing competitiveness of the economy, mobilizing private capital and competition in the broadband market, and strengthening social protection institutions, delivery systems and targeting. Following this meeting, World Bank Director for Sri Lanka, Faris Hadad-Zervos, and the World Bank delegation also met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe and briefed him on these matters. Now stay with us to find out more details on the luxury passenger cruise ship Viking Mars that called at the Colombo port earlier today after this short commercial break.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, luxury passenger cruise ship Viking Mars called the Colombo port today with 900 tourists on board. The ship will be docked in Sri Lanka for 2 days, and tourists on board are expected to visit places in the central province and down south.
The Viking Mars arrived at the port of Colombo with 900 tourists for a show excursion. This is also the first luxury passenger cruise ship to visit Sri Lanka after the COVID-19 pandemic, officially commencing the winter tourist season for cruise calls. During the excursions, the tourists on board are expected to visit Kandy and Pinnawala, Galle, and also enjoy boat tours in Muthurajawala and the Madhu River.
This cruise is going around the world, taking people, many from Australia, the United States, Europe, to see places, beautiful places like Sri Lanka. So clean and very nice and beautiful weather today. My first time. But I'm from Sydney, so I know quite a few people in Australia from Sri Lanka, and I always like the Sri Lankan food. Hoppers.
I think Sri Lanka's a wonderful place. Obviously, you've had some difficulties recently, but hopefully they are getting better. But it's a strong culture. It's got beautiful people. I love the food.
Been in Sri Lanka before, and we spent like about 10 days here last time, and we travelled around a lot, and it was just fabulous, really beautiful. The architecture's stunning.
Now, the Minister of Agriculture, Wildlife and Forest Resources Conservation, Mahinda Amaravira, said that a new countrywide census of elephants is expected to be conducted next year, as the last census in the country was carried out in 2011. The minister stated that a long-term program to reduce human-elephant conflict will be prepared as one of the measures, and a full census of elephants will also be conducted. He mentioned this at the first meeting of the Ministerial Consultative Committee on Wildlife and Forest Resources Conservation on Tuesday for the third session of the 9th Parliament. His remarks came as a response to a question raised by the MPs about the human-elephant conflict. Many MPs brought the minister's attention to the human-elephant conflict in various parts of the country, including Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Ratnapura and Ampara districts. It was also revealed that the number of reasons, including the reduction of elephant habitats and the significant increase in elephant population, have led to the elephant-human conflict. The minister said that 16 main elephant corridors in the island have been blocked, and this is due to the arrival of elephants in villages have increased. As such, he pledged to remove these obstacles without delay. Now, an earthquake of magnitude 6.8 was reported in the Indian Ocean at 7:07 p.m. this evening. Reportedly, the epicenter of the earthquake was the south of Sumatra Islands. The earthquake struck at a depth of 10 kilometers from the surface. However, the meteorology department stated that there is no threat of a tsunami to the island at the moment. Thereby, the coastal areas of the island are declared safe, the meteorology statement said. In a business news, Sri Lanka had postponed yesterday's round of debt restructuring talks with creditors to allow the central bank clarify a number of different concerns raised by different creditors. Speaking to international media, State Minister of Finance Shayant Semasinghe said that although financial assurances have not been received by any bilateral creditors so far, Sri Lankan officials are working hard to meet targets set for December. Speaking to Reuters, State Minister of Finance Shayant Semasinghe said concerns have been raised by creditors, to which clarifications are needed, and therefore Sri Lankan officials had decided to postpone a round of debt restructuring talks scheduled for yesterday in order to allow the central bank communicate clarifications before scheduling further talks. Sri Lanka formally kicked off talks in September after securing a preliminary agreement for a $2.9 billion bailout package with the International Monetary Fund. However, Sri Lanka currently needs to obtain financing assurances from key creditors including China, Japan and India before the funds can be dispersed. Simbasinga, while saying that a new schedule for talks is yet to be decided in this regard, did not provide details on the creditor concerns or what exactly was being discussed between them and Sri Lanka's central bank and treasury officials. Sri Lanka had earlier set a target of receiving board-level IMF approval in December for the planned 4-year program. The state finance minister added that the officials are focusing on financing assurances that no bilateral creditor has informed that they are not going to support Sri Lanka. He went on to say that Sri Lanka has a target that the officials are pushing hard to meet by December. Now, the Colombo shares fell for a 5th straight session today and closed at more than 3.5-month low amid negative sentiment over the taxes and fees announced in the budget. The all share price index closed 2.7% lower at 7,817.89, its lowest since the 1st of August. The more liquid index, S&P SL20, closed 3.2% lower at 2,381.53. The market had a turnover of 1.4 billion rupees, less than half of this year's daily average of 3 billion rupees. The market saw a foreign inflow of 94 million rupees, extending total net foreign inflows to 18.2 billion rupees so far this year. Expo Lanka, dragging the market down, fell 7.7% to close at 122.8 rupees a share. Meanwhile, Richard Paris and Company fell 7.8% to close at 20 rupees, while Lanka IOC closed down 5.3% at 164.3 rupees. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies in the world. And that concludes tonight's edition of First at 9. Join us again tomorrow at the very same time for the very latest news. Until then, visit our website www.AdaDerana.lk. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.